Outer Wilds and Disco Elysium are two of the most impactful games I've ever played, and to me, they're inextricably linked. This is for multiple reasons, some personal, some not. I played them both at nearly the same time, sharing the joys of both with one of my friends over a sleep-deprived, taco-fueled week of gaming glory. And the emotions that they pull from me, even to this day, are profound yet similar. They both exist within a wistful murk for the bulk of their stories, unfolding layers of their mysteries to paint the present dreary and the past tragic. And for much of the playtime of both games, the future festers in that same sorrow. The dreams of characters you meet, the goals your protagonist espouses, all left unborn in the face of the unstoppable death of the sun or the all-consuming march of capital. But both still manage to leave you with some hope, showing what can be accomplished through cooperation and action, even in just the little ways. They demonstrate the corrupting force of despair, as it curdles the little agency that any of us can grasp onto in this world. Despite their alignment in my mind, I still have to admit that they are starkly different across gameplay, story, genre, and scope. And even while their themes overlap, there's a great deal clashing beyond that which is consonant. Each game goes about crafting its emotional experience in different ways, and the many angles of each story's meaning highlight different perspectives and underlying nuances. When placed in conversation, I think these two texts have a great deal to say about each other, the world we live in, and how to untangle this great big messy life we all lead. Before getting any further into the video, I want to stress again that spoilers, especially spoilers for Outer Wilds, will diminish your first-time experience with these games. If that's a sacrifice you're willing to make, that's fine, just go unaware. Part 1. Existence Precedes Essence. Outer Wilds, above anything else, is a game about exploration, adventure, and experience. You are the newest member of Outer Wilds Ventures, and a whole solar system is your stomping ground. Each planet offers puzzles, stories, and relics from long-dead alien precursors. There's a lot to do, at least until the sun explodes 22 minutes into your frolicking among the stars. The game's commitment to experiential bliss starts from the very beginning. After completing the tutorials and getting to the observatory, you talk to Ground Control, Hornfels, to get your launch codes and mission briefing. Before he sends you out to space, he asks you what you're looking forward to doing in the black. The game lets you pick from a bevy of options, from investigating the ruins of the ancient Nomai, to exploring the unexplored, to just flying by the seat of your pants. The developers have talked about this moment as a key to the philosophy of the game. Originally, Hornfels was going to tell you about all the things that you could do before sending you on your way. But instead, the developers decided that the player should be the one to pick, without anything being prescribed for them. The options are presented, but it's made clear that each player should start by pursuing whatever is the most adventurous for them. Options like, I'll start with something small, or, I don't know, also open up less specific or preset goals. The individual experiences and goals each player has for their time in the wilds are paramount. Many hooks are presented beyond this choice to tempt the player into excitement from the very beginning. The first thing you see after starting the game is an explosion in orbit of Giant's Deep. A bigger push through dialogue is given to check out some ruins on the Adelrock. Some players may be drawn to the creepy icy vines hovering at the very edge of the solar system. None of these starting points are wrong. The network of clues towards the larger plot points can be accessed from anywhere, and each person's experience will be different based upon what they value and what actions they take. With this in mind, we need to talk briefly about existentialism. Existentialism is a branch of philosophy concerned with what is, how we experience the world, and the freedom of our actions. Grown from phenomenology before it, existentialism seeks to understand by going directly to the things themselves, instead of starting from axioms or endlessly circling how anyone can know they actually perceive anything. Personal experience, subjective interpretation, and freedom become paramount, even axiomatic. This inherent subjectivity can be neatly expressed through the phrase, existence precedes essence. Humans don't have an essence, an ingrained purpose or set of values. Our conscious existence is the only valid tool we can use to determine what we want and how we see the world, and that should be a profoundly individual decision. This seems very familiar, no? Motivation, goals, how we see the world or worlds around us determined by radically free personal choice. In their own smaller ways, you see the other astronauts from Outer Wilds ventures engage with the solar system in a way that validates and replicates their inner values and goals upon their conscious experience of the world. To Feldspar, the universe is one big adventure, and because of it, he finds adventure everywhere he goes, eventually crashing inside the most treacherous spaces of the game. Gabbro was always the most chill of the astronauts, writing poetry and enjoying the pleasures of a nice hammock. As he was investigating Giant's Deep in the Nomai statue workshop there, he was paired into the time loop your character gets stuck in, and now he's ever more at peace with his own philosophizing way of being, set adrift from any need for time pressures or consequences. Ryback is terrified of everything, yet pursues his adventures based on an innate passion for archaeology. He ends up on the most unstable and dangerous planet, constantly aware of the black hole threatening to consume him below. Chert is the most passionate scientist of the bunch, focused on the stars. He clings to that rational method as his readings go from excitement about the number of supernovae he sees into a deep, deep dread about the state of his own star. This importance of individually motivated perception and action plays out through the finale of the game's main story as well. The ultimate ending comes about when you reach the Eye, the source of all quantum, observer-dependent objects in the solar system. This quantum body weaves together mental models of all the friends you've met along your journey into a universal reboot. The importance of your perception and choices is evidenced in the 4 endings of the game. If you've met and conversed with Solanum, this new universe has campfires and insectoid aliens. If you've met the prisoner and invite them to join the song, the makeup of the planets incorporate water, glowing the same ghostly cerulean as the gas giant so important to the Owlugs. If you've met both, multiple species will meet at the edge of the campfire, bearing lanterns towards the darkness. This ending can be read to validate the existential belief that existence precedes essence. Our character's being, and thus how the Eye reboots the universe, is for itself in the existentialist sense, conscious and free, fueled by our choice of goals, values, and actions as a player. In the Outer Wilds, the world is literally what we make of it. Part 2. The Chains of an Unborn Future. Disco Elysium as a game exists within an interesting overlap. On one hand, the sheer scope and number of choices that face you as a player provide an intense and all-consuming freedom from a simulationist perspective. On the other hand, the range of things that your character can actually do is quite limited, especially in the first couple of days. These initial hours in the game are filled with roadblocks and constant failure. This state of limited agency is potent, putting you in the shoes of a fucked-up amnesiac cop, exploring a new world for the first time. Folks tell you you're in Martinez, a district within the city of Revachol. There's been a murder that you've been called here to solve. A body is hanging behind the Whirling in Rags cafeteria. Your best guess at a name for yourself is Raphael Ambrosius Cousteau. Eventually, you find out you once were named Harry. A common experience among new players is to die within the first 3 minutes upon turning on a light or trying to grab your tie from the ceiling fan. It's me, I was new players. From there, your prospects as a character only get more grim. Many people I've talked to have been absolutely taken in by the writing and performance of this masterwork, yet so weighed down by the oppressive atmosphere that they needed to take regular breaks from the game. I myself could only engage with my first playthrough for so long at a time before I understood the bounds of the game better. Your character has already fucked up so much around him, and the fear of doing more damage can be paralyzing. This restricted agency is part of how Disco Elysium asks the player a key question. How can someone truly be free, craft a life according to their experience and values, when they are bound by the ghost of an unborn future? Martinez is littered with those burdened by the past, both what has happened and what never could. René and Gaston sit in one of the craters littering the coast, a reminder of the conflict that initially tore them apart, fighting over and over while clinging to each other all the same. Liliane looks out from a fisherwoman's shack that has been forgotten by the world and left to be subsumed into the marsh, her gaze searching for a hopeful future in the sun rising over ocean waves where her husband drowned. Kuno is stuck between intense poverty and a drug-addled, abusive father. The burden of those generational cycles of trauma is plain from how he sees the world. Tommy looks down the long road home, a place he's forced to be away from for so long by the juggernaut that is the Wild Pines Corporation. A working-class woman is perusing a bookstand out in the cold, unaware that her husband has fallen and died a kilometer away. Martinez has been wrecked time and time again. It started under the oppressive rule of the monarchical suzerain. Krasmazov and his followers wanted better and led a revolution. They shot lots of people in the head before their dreams of change, harbored within this violent gasp at a new future, were snuffed. The Coalition, a group of moralist regimes, arrived and bombed Revachol decades into the past. Now this forlorn coast is strapped into a cycle of forced poverty, violent union busting, and narcotics infused in everyday life. So many characters are stuck fighting for their own survival, be that physical or mental, that they can't even consider the failed project that so many killed and died for 40 years ago. No matter the values these characters have, or the meaning they've ascribed to life, their scope of action, just to keep breathing, is horrifically sparse. Work under the corrupt protection of the Union and push for collective gains, so long as you don't ruffle Edgar or Everett's feathers. Become a scab for Wild Pines and be subjected to worse pay and less respect from everyone around you? Scrounge what you can, where you can, to keep your boat functional, as it's the only source of further income. The people of Martinez don't have the consequence-free romp of your astronaut in Outer Wilds. There's no Know My Computer to rewind the clock after a missed paycheck, a broken board underfoot, or one drink too many. With limitations like these, is it possible to still live a free life? In Being in Nothingness, Jean-Paul Sartre talks about the meaning of freedom and what it means to act. No factual state, whatever it may be, the political and economic structure of society, the psychological state, etc., is capable by itself of motivating any act whatsoever. This seems hyperbolic at first, but Sartre is saying something specific about how our thoughts exist at the genesis of our actions. The key distinction here is between the state of the world itself and one's conscious understanding of the state of the world. Crucially, the ability to imagine a better world than the one we inhabit. Sartre argues that this conscious maintenance of what is and what can be creates gap that can be crossed, and that is the true impetus for free action. If the state of the world, with its injustice and adversity, are conceived of as inevitable, natural, then it's impossible to imagine a way of being that doesn't incorporate those same injustices, and thus, it becomes impossible to freely act to remedy them. If one's misfortunes do not appear to them as habitual, but rather natural, they are, that is all. To suffer and to be are one and the same. Only if you can perceive the maladies of the world as a layer on top of baseline truths of existence can you be free. Through this lens of free action, you can read a lot about the apes duking it out in Martinez. Their understanding of habitual versus natural suffering, and the actions they take based on that understanding, line up with how the game otherwise presents characters as moral agents. Pretty much all the characters are drawn in shades of gray, so none of these are one-dimensional endorsements or condemnations, but they're still informative in how the game frames our ethical consideration. We see characters who are aware of suffering as habitual and acting framed as heroes, characters who are aware of suffering as habitual and not acting framed as villains, and characters who feel their suffering is natural are framed, ultimately, as victims. Kuno. Kuno is such an interesting character because practically every player I've seen has gone from hating him to finding him endearing, or at least tragic and not as hateable. He's a little shit, and he throws rocks and slurs around your crime scene, but the more you learn about his family life, his care for Kuno S, and his dependence on drugs, the more you can see into the true tragedy of his character. He's mirroring the version of the world that has traumatized him. Kuno's father has become a role model of sorts, a Goliath who will tear us to shreds, epitomizing the power that Kuno aspires to wield. Kuno talks about being in big business, killing pigs, etc., but when you talk to him up close, that's not who he is. Kuno's tragedy is that he sees his suffering as natural, some aspects as aspirational even. It's just the way of the world, the way that the world should be, the way he should be. In certain endings of the game, it's a triumph as he starts conceptualizing a world that he could fight for, a world better than the one he inhabits. Everett. Everett is another character I initially disliked, but grew to appreciate. As the boss of the Dockworkers Union, an organization your case briefing suggests houses prime suspects for the murder, he acts as an obstacle, a necessary evil, a ransomer, and a helping hand at different points of the game. He's horribly corrupt, and your first conversation with him is essentially this game's version of a boss battle. But as you learn through the course of the story, he is genuinely committed to creating a better Martinez separate from the claws of Wild Pines. That is, so long as some of the hierarchies are maintained, and he's on top. Everett is a character who's very aware of the shit state of Martinez, and who has a concrete idea of the change he wants to make. So in some ways, he's the most active character of the whole game. And through these actions, some corrupt and some genuinely caring, we can see his moral alignment and engage with that. Joyce. Joyce is one of the few characters in the game who is aware of the suffering that Martinez is inflicted with, can conceive of it as habitual rather than natural, and has the power to change the conditions of that suffering. Yet she does practically nothing. She's the negotiator, and eventually you may learn a board member, of the Wild Pines Group, a corporation that's partly responsible for choking Martinez into poverty. However, due to her general personability, a contrast to other powerful characters you meet like Everett and Titus, many start the game seeing her through a less villainous lens. She talks to you about ideas and reality, and constantly looks like she's doing something. She wants to share company details with you, but oh no, looks like you don't have your badge. I guess you could do this work for me instead. She's not bribing you, just giving you money when you asked. 100 real feels like nothing to her, yet she must know it means a lot to you. Even when it comes to the end of the game, she does say she's going to stop Wild Pines from sending more kill squads into Martinez. But no matter how she passes it off, it's clear that this is ultimately a business decision. Her existence in Revachol is a microcosm of moralism's total freeze on progress. Platitudes, personability, yet no action. And definitely not one that goes against the bottom line. She is free to act, more so than anyone else you meet, yet does not. Tommy. Tommy is at an interesting point as a character. Unlike Kuno, he is definitely aware that the suffering all around him is not natural. It's caused by the system he lives in. He has a pervasive sadness about him from missing his family deeply, knowing that this job supporting them keeps him away. Tommy is memorable, tragic, and hopeful because of how he responds to this situation. His actions are not under his control, and he knows it. All the same, he fills his lonesome hours with poetry, pondering, and genuine connection with those he talks to. He's gotten to know Ruby deeply. He gets to know you too, and he'll spend time trying to wrap words around his experiences of the world. What it's like to miss someone, the feeling of connection to a place far away whenever it snows. He's been doing the best he can with what's been done to him, and there's freedom in that. Part 3. On Death. The toy solar system of Outer Wilds is doomed from the moment you boot up the game, whether you know it or not. 22 minutes after you wake up on Timber Hearth, the sun reaches the natural end of its life and vaporizes all its surroundings in searing teal plasma. And it's not just your sun. Chert sits on the Ember Twin, playing their drums and watching the sky. They've noticed something quite disturbing. The stars are going out. You can witness this as a player, too. Pick out a star in the black and stare at it long enough, and it will dissolve into its own cloud of death. The universe in Outer Wilds is doomed from the moment you boot up the game. Inevitable heat death has come for us all. Even escaping the nova of your sun won't save you from drifting endlessly into the blackness of space, all alone until your warmth slowly equilibrates into the nothingness that has become everything around you. Doom also strikes closer to home. There's a crater leaking smoke on Timber Hearth, watched over by Tektite. He puzzles what to do about this thorny seed surging in size across your home planet, while faintly echoing harmonica tunes. Over time, you figure out this seed originated in the Dark Bramble, which used to be an icy world itself, before a similar growth tore the planet to pieces and consumed it within extra-dimensional caverns and carnivorous anglerfish. Timber Hearth is doomed from the moment you boot up the game, whether you know it or not. Even if your sun wasn't dying, even if the universe wasn't dying, your home world, the only easily habitable one in the solar system, is doomed. Martinez is a purgatory of human design, as Harry Dubois, Raphael Ambrosius Cousteau, your detective, wakes up in the whirling in rags. Revachol faces innumerable apocalypses on every scale. Most of its residents are living out their own end times as poverty festers in the scars left by the suzerain, the revolution, and the coalition. The specter of the doomed commercial district bears its teeth at the businesses still struggling to hold on along Rue de Saint-Ghislain, as well as their loyal, sometimes dependent patrons. Threat of war in the streets of Martinez looms as the Wild Pines Corporation deploys war criminals in an attempt to maintain their grip on power over the harbor, promising even more widespread destruction. Far away, down the marshy coast, an old wooden church contains a 2mm hole in the world, keeping otherworldly, boundless silence at bay in its rafter, and standing strong against the cold forces of the world that destroyed all its brethren in the many, many years since the first construction onto Insulinde. Kilometers out into icy waters, the shimmering veil of reality is lifted, and all that remains is the pale. A roiling, oily, vapid cacophony of shifting memory, chaos, and nothingness, ever expanding its reach, choking the receding dominion of humanity. How is one to deal with this doom, this growing death? There's no easy answer from either game, at least when it comes to larger-scale prevention of the apocalypse. No matter what you do in the Outer Wilds, the sun will explode, everyone you know will die, and you will forever cease to exist. The systems of oppression and destruction wrought upon Revachol will continue under moralist rule. There is very little that your character can do over the course of the game to stop it. You can potentially help Kuno out a little, save members of the Hardy Boys, and tell Joyce not to destroy Martinez. Those we've talked about before, this isn't necessarily something you convince her out of. Where both games find hope against death is based in the reality of their worlds and the source of their ruinations. Outer Wilds is the more fantastical of the two in many ways. Your character's scale much larger relative to the universe you interact with. Because of this setup, the hopeful resolution of death in the wilds is a bit more obvious. Your character finds the Eye, redeems the Nomai, plus possibly the Owl Elks, and makes a new universe that carries forward from some seed of your wizened experience of the world. It says fairly plainly that the way we approach death necessarily alters what comes next. It's worth fighting to find the Eye, because it will create a place for the insectoid aliens that come after you to find their chance at happiness, even if you will be long dead and gone. This is a great message to carry forward, and a search of YouTube will show a smorgasbord of videos titled Outer Wilds Changed My Life, or something similar. However, it is very broad, and thus less potent, with potential drawbacks, when applied to a world as complex and limited as ours. The setup of Disco Elysium is more nuanced. You are an infinitesimally small speck in the game's world. This scale, compared to the forces at play across Revachol, allows the lessons of the game to hit much closer to home in our reality. Elysium, the planet upon which Revachol sits, is more real to Earth than Timber Hearth, and shaped by similar forces to those that affect our daily lives. One huge contrast that affects the messages presented by the two games is the originating point of the ruin facing the universe. In Outer Wilds, all end times are triggered by the natural, the inevitable. The sun going out, a fast-growing extra-dimensional plant, universal heat death. The sources of ruin in Disco Elysium are all human. Even the Pale, the universal threat facing the Isolas, originated with humanity. Well, at least that's what the cryptid says. Much of the human despair in Disco Elysium comes from the stagnation of history. Characters like René and Gaston, or the paranoid Plaisance, are brought to their apocalypses by shackling themselves to history. René wants to go back to the good old days, and Plaisance wants to avoid the curse that promised bankruptcy to all previous businesses. It's telling that those in Revachol look to the past. Humans do tend to fall into that trap, but especially so when they aren't given much to hope for in the future. The moral intern has put a freeze on what was once the capital of the world, letting the doldrums stretch beyond the horizon. If you pursue moralism, the centrist ideology underpinning the moral intern and the coalition that rules Revachol, your thought process concludes with this.
The kingdom of conscience will be exactly as it is now. Moralists don't really have beliefs. Sometimes they stumble on one, like on a child's toy left on the carpet. The toy must be put away immediately, and the child reprimanded. Centrism isn't change. not even incremental change. It is control over yourself and the world. Exercise it. Look up at the sky, at the dark shapes of the coalition airships hanging there. Ask yourself, is there something sinister in moralism? And then answer, no. God is in his heaven. Everything is normal on earth.
The Coalition doesn't offer a better future for those in Martinez, and neither will their past. This isn't to say that Disco Elysium espouses a full separation from history, and an ignorance of how we got here. The game proposes a more revolutionary approach. It looks towards a use of the past, a recognition of now, and most importantly, a radical envisioning of what comes next. Being able to conceive a better world is the key, just as it was to Sartre. This lets Harry begin to move past his substance issues and his relationship with his ex. It helps the future of hypnotic dance music flourish on the precipice of the unknown, and it's what inspires Liliane every day, looking to the sun and rainy skies. It may just allow humanity to achieve the impossible. Outer Wilds and Disco Elysium's apocalypses are framed as inevitable versus human, natural versus habitual. And this affects how the games push us to move forward. Both games urge you to look back on your experiences and take them towards a new universe. But at Disco Elysium, there's no quantum entity to reboot that universe for you. The game challenges you to imagine, believe in, and most importantly, build the new ourselves. Part 4. Memory and History. The weight of history isn't just present in Disco Elysium. In the DLC, Outer Wilds, Echoes of the Eye, we see the impact of species-wide shame, erasure of collective memory, and the way that such a focus on the past drags a whole culture into murky depths. The fate of the Owl Elks is the only one in the whole game framed as habitual. The prisoner's existence requires you to imagine a different, better world for these creatures. The setting of the expansion itself is secreted away. A small circle of blackness against space, only clearly visible when it passes between you and the sun, hiding a massive ring world. The player's time on the stranger is constantly eerie, from the aesthetic thematic focus on dark, and occasionally light, to the homes filled with family photos and warm decorations left to rot. Everything has a sense of abandonment that, due to expert audiovisual design, feels frighteningly temporary. As you explore the 4 main settlements on the stranger, you realize that it has been here a long time. Ghost matter is present, meaning that the stranger was at the very least contemporary with the Nomai, though likely predated their arrival to the system. The Owl Elks adorning the walls are staring at you with their glowing eyes from millennia in the past. Mechanically speaking, DLC presents differently as well. While the base game plays out as a puzzle box across space and time, through the whole set of planets and their natural gimmicks, Echoes of the Eye brings an energy that might have sprouted from a hellspawn lovechild of Myst and Outlast. Keys, codes, and interactions with sentient-made puzzles are more common. And while time-based solutions do spring up occasionally, the loop of the base game feels less present when you're on the stranger. Time is frozen until it isn't, and you're reminded by the sudden submersion of your sleeping character or the loop resetting itself as you drift beyond the range of the supernova. The way this DLC is so space-specific and time-invariant helps you focus not on the present and the loop, but the past and the history of the Owl Elks. One of the neatest tricks the DLC pulls is in its opening moments. You come across the Owl Elks' green language scrawled on signs. Translating Nomai writing has become commonplace to you, especially if you played the base game before the DLC like I did. So you walk up to scan, curious what the mechanic of translating the written language will be. Your translator has nothing. When I first saw the writing, I didn't expect to get a translation, but perhaps some way to read enough text to start forming partial translations, a la Returnal. But no. The realization dawns that this text will forever be unknown. The primary way that you've interacted with the Nomai in their past is ripped from you, and so you must pursue a more difficult path of discovery. Insight into the Owl Elk's history comes in 2 ways. First, you can look for clues among the ruins, the temple to the eye that was torched, or the paintings depicting the lush home system that spawned this odd species. Second, you find slide reels throughout the stranger, and later in its digital archive. All you learn about the stranger and its history comes in the form of images, never text. It's a strong departure from how you learn about the Nomai, and further integrates with the importance of history, memory, and symbology. The symbols are important and carry a mimetic, mythical weight. The eye, the gas giant constantly in the sky of the Owluk's homeworld, the locked vault, green fire. These exist as key lodestars within the Owluk mythology, and have trapped them in their state of living death. The shame and regret from destroying their homeworld to build the stranger, and the conviction that the eye should never be accessed, have become so all-consuming that they live in shadow, unknown by Nomai and Harthian alike. Their culture, existence, and any remnant of the home they loved lost to time. At least until you arrive. Through your interaction with the stranger, and the prisoner within, you can redeem the Owluks, and bring a new conception of their history forward with you, as you eventually find the eye. Your mental vision of the prisoner stands away from the fire, and they ask you if you want them to be remembered. They're afraid that their fear and guilt will taint the upcoming universe. As you invite them to the fire, you assure them that they deserve to be remembered. Their history deserves to be known. And in combination with Solanum, the knowledge and experience of the Owluks have a chance to live again through the new species populating the new universe without trapping them to the same mistakes and deaths. Memory is also very prominent in Disco Elysium. You play as a fantastic science fiction amnesiac cop after all. History is stagnant in Revachol, but memory is like quicksand. I want to focus on 3 cases of memory in Disco Elysium, and how it traps the citizens of the coast as much as it does the Owluks. René and Gaston. I've touched on René and Gaston earlier, but their story is so infused with history and memory that it deserves another look here. These are 2 men that love each other while hating what the other represents. They have memories competing for their shared love, and this is a big topic when you talk to the pair. The source, perhaps even the seed of their animosity, comes from this. Additionally, René clings to the better time under the suzerain, when the world was right and the hierarchies were where they were supposed to be. This devotion to the post-hoc, emotionally charged memory of his past keeps him stressed, strung out, and spending his nights trying to regain some semblance of duty associated with those good old days. It's all in vain, though. His guard duty just theater, and his charge, the harbor, home to the union that he despises so greatly. In the end, he dies in that booth, in the cold, still trapped in his imagined past as his heart stops in his chest. Finally, Gaston remembers René. Perhaps he's the only one who really can. Harry. Raphael Ambrosius Cousteau spends the entire game haunted by a history he was not involved in. A past without associated memory. You roll through a coast racked by your decisions as well as the decisions of others, and are forced to reconcile them with your new personhood. You're still piloting the bloated meat machine of the old Harry that did these things, however, and buried memories still have a pull. Ex-love, ex-tenderness. The specter of your ex-something haunts Raphael from the moment you emerge from primordial blackness. The smell of apricot chewing gum sends you unconscious. Her number is still in your fingers. It just takes a little bit to reach it. This trap is unambiguously bad for Harry, Raphael, whatever you call yourself. You're led to drink, do drugs, push yourself further and harder than you should, and those instincts are one of the few things that don't leave you after you drink your soul into oblivion. The journey of the game is the story of Harry pulling away from the hold the past has on him, by dreaming and creating a better future for himself. Or at least that's one of the stories you can tell. The Deserter. At the very end of the game, you find the person who killed the hangman, Josef Lilianovich Dross. Alone on the seafort freezing in the bay, the last survivor of the commune of O2 sits by a meager fire. His mind is oozing away into the soil. Whether due to the pheromones from a giant stick insect cryptid, or just age and isolation, none can say. What's left of his conscious thought is still trapped, some in a creepy erotic fixation with Classe, but most in the past with the revolution. The following are borrowed observations from Kay and Skittles. Check out their video. To the Deserter, the revolution was pure and perfect, and now everyone is dead. The commune of O2 is cursed to never rise again. If all of his friends and brethren failed, what can succeed now against the power of capital? This doomerism can ring true if you look at the desolation that has gripped Martinez, but ultimately the game shows you, through the Deserter, that this hopelessness is hollowing. Dross's lack of belief flies in the face of so much that you see throughout the game. The conditions for a new revolution are here. A war nearly kicked off after his creepy sex pest ass killed the Wild Pines mercenary. The people of Revachol haven't become sheep. The revolution deserves to be remembered for its goals and dreams, but also for its failures and the means of its destruction. Only then, informed but not trapped, will the people of Revachol be able to dream of a new future. And new futures must be dreamed before they are born. The prisoner and Echoes of the Eye dreamed of a better future. A future free of stagnation and guilt. Their act to release the Eye's signal, even for so short a time, is a radical step forward that epitomizes the hope of Disco Elysium. It's the one time that a character in either Outer Wilds or its DLC act freely to not just deal with the inevitable, but break habitual suffering. And this layer on the thematic statements of the base game gives a glimpse of the hope that Disco Elysium seeks to share. Part 5. Hope. Both Outer Wilds and Disco Elysium leave you with hope, despite the bleak moments that may precede them. Outer Wilds has the more clearly happy ending, with the new universe richly inspired by your adventures through the solar system and the folks you met along the way. Even the ending of the DLC is bittersweet, but ultimately a positive one. You meet the lone owl elk who took action opposed to the species-wide repressive shame, and was punished for it. They give you a clear history, the final, comprehensive picture of all the burned slide reels you find throughout the DLC. And you show them in return that their sacrifice was worthwhile. They send you off with a kind message of camaraderie as they take the lightless walk, and you see a version of them again in the Eye at the end of all things. Everything is tied neatly in a bow. You were given an apocalyptic scenario, and you massaged it out to a place of genuine freedom and incredible feats. You always have choices, even at the end of the universe. The world is what you make of it, and the game's final moments show that it isn't really an end at all. This is a great lesson to take when dealing with the inevitable darkness that we will all one day face. But it just isn't quite good enough when we look at day-to-day decisions about suffering that may just be habitual. If you have a hammer, everything becomes a nail. If our only tooling is to help process the natural or inevitable, we may be blinded to what is only habitual. Echoes of the Eye brings a hint of habitual thinking in its consideration of the owl elks and their history, and the suffering that they inflicted on each other and the Nomai through their shame and lack of action. By remembering the owl elks, their good and their bad, you are making active choices to create a new universe that is cognizant of their history, yet looking towards the future. Disco Elysium's ending lives in the habitual. Amidst the bender that banished Harry's past, he screamed how he doesn't want to be this kind of animal anymore. In a way, he accomplished his goal. You, the player, enter the game and Harry's body as a blank slate, empty of assumptions taken for granted based on what is. It's a perfect setup to imagine a better world. The game is still more realistic in its portrayal of the trials and sacrifice that creating a better world entails. Your character really can't do that much during their stint in Martinez that affects the outside world. Perhaps the biggest impact you can have is whether or not Everett builds his youth center along the coast. However, there are important character moments you have a lot of control in shaping. Will Kuno change his life? Does Measurehead get his face rearranged by a jump-spinning hook kick? Will Kim get shot? Will the Speed Freak start a nightclub with a drug side hustle or without? Each of these are notable moments, not for the world or the universe, but for the characters involved. You share your superpower, opening up their minds to imagine more radically different potential futures as well. Kuno's world can change over the week this game covers. The uncompressed sound of pale nothingness can enter the anodic dance music space, inspiring Egghead to be truly hardcore, but not too hardcore. You can converse with a cryptid about the state of the world and the havoc humanity has wreaked, inspiring Kim to see a little bit of the impossible in everyday life. And with sufficient revolutionary fervor, you can work with 2 university students to build an impossible structure out of matchboxes. It's a small moment of peace and true hope among the desolation of Revachol. For just a second or two, impossible things can exist because you can imagine them, because you can hope for them. The Coalition claims that history is made, personified, by once-a-millennia figures, innocents. But in this moment, standing with the matchboxes in a pile at Harry's feet, the game is telling you that no, it's not the innocents that make history. History is made by everyone. The brave people who first crossed the Pale and found the other Insulinde, Morel, looking for a Phasmid to prove his wife right, Cindy cutting scalding letters to the heavens proclaiming, "One day I'll return to your side," Any person who can think to dream of a new, better future, who can see the burdens of this world as habitual instead of natural, and seek to kick the habit. They make the future every day. And this is the crux of the thematic theses of Outer Wilds and Disco Elysium. While Echoes of the Eye did good work developing some themes around conceptualizing and challenging habitual suffering, the game's overall concern with the inevitable, supernova, heat death, etc., shackles its message to hope through acceptance of inevitability. The danger here is that treating habitual problems as natural is far more treacherous than treating natural problems as habitual. History has taught us that we're very bad at determining what is truly natural, so it's preferable to try and make the world better, even if it's doomed to fail. This is the type of ceaseless imagination at the vanguard of Disco Elysium's ideas. In the same book club where you make the impossible structure out of matchboxes, you reflect on failure, and that no matter how many times humanity or the world lets us down, a belief in the future must remain strong. Harry has failed time and time again, both before you take control of the amnesiac drunk in his hotel room and after. Undoubtedly, you failed many times in the Outer Wilds, only to be graced with a slideshow of your mistakes and a fresh start. In our day-to-day lives, we fail all the time, at things both big and small. In the world, the systems that we've built around us fail countless people every day. A radical belief in the future necessitates challenging all failures and injustices as if they're habitual, trying to imagine a better world that we can strive to achieve, no matter how many times that future may die before it can be born. And once enough people refuse to believe that the world has to remain like this, anything is possible.